Okay, yeah, we go this side. Be careful, this is an iron beam, so tougher. Yeah. So, and we'll also be going down here. So also again, mind your steps. Be careful.
Hartstikke.
Make a circle around here. I'll do something the same. This is definitely the toughest part for you.
Okay,
So,
yeah, I mean,
once you've got this, you've got it.
if I have to walk.
All right, thanks. So we're here now about 35 meters below the parking lot that we just went over. Above us, there's still about 10 meters of stone and then another 20 meters of soil. Quite a distance already down. This is the deepest point that we get. But before I continue, I first would like to welcome you on behalf of Maastricht Underground, which is actually the organization that provides these tours, and also on behalf of Natuurmonumenten, which is the Dutch Society for Nature Monuments. They're actually the owner of these caves. Now, I've used the word caves, and you bought tickets for caves, and when you think of caves, generally you think of these underground rooms that were made by nature over thousands of years, by water, wind, chemicals. It's not what you expect here. And in fact, these are not really caves, because these are man-made, and also not thousands of years, but about 600 years. These are mines, limestone mines. It started around 1300, when Maastricht needed a lot of construction material, and they knew, or even Romans knew, that there was a lot of limestone here in these layers in the Petersberg. So they started to excavate, take out many of these stones, and you can see the size of the stones that they took out, actually roughly already here. These sides, a meter, 1.5 meter high, 50, 60 centimeters wide. They would weigh about 500 to 800 kilos, so quite heavy. 1500 needed more, because churches needed to be built, cloisters, more houses, of course, the city wall. And that lasted until about 1900. By that time, people started to build houses using bricks and mortar, and they didn't need any of these stones anymore. But by then, 1900s, after 600 years of mining, there were about 22,000 tunnels here underground, with a total length of about 200 kilometers. So that's massive. They are not here all anymore, but I will also talk about it later. So around 1900, the mining here underground stopped. Of course, the owners of the mines also thought, well, we missed some income, we need to do something commercially. And then they decided, well, what could we do? Invite tourists. That's what they did already around 1900, but it was very exclusive at that point in time, because a tour would cost then about 2 guilders 50, which would be the equivalent of €100 now. And to make it more attractive, because actually there were more owners, more mines here in this area, they also asked artists to create paintings, sculptures in these mines. So you will be seeing all kinds of different paintings, sculptures, while we walk along. Now these paintings, sculptures are very fragile, so you should not touch them. But at least you realize all the paintings are from after 1900. They are not made by the miners or the block breakers, as they were called, because they break out blocks. You do see inscriptions that can be much older. The oldest inscription here is about 1556, but already over here, for example, 1937. So the block breakers would use some inscriptions also for them to understand where they are, etc. Well, in those days, and in the hundreds of years that they've been doing this, many people visited these mines, lovers who wanted to have some free space, but also refugees, soldiers, all kinds. And there's even saying that there were also witches there. Well, there still are witches here. If you look at the pictures over there, this is one of the pictures. You can see it depicts what at least people thought there might have been in the past. This picture is from 1954, and it's still very good. As long as nobody touches it. Very good shape. Okay, let's one thing, because it's so fragile, I said don't touch the paintings or the inscriptions. And also, there's a lot of history here that you are looking at. We don't need additional history, so there's no need for you to make any additional inscriptions. You follow me just a few meters. Stand over there, then. Okay, another painting of the same artist, also 1954. The painting that we see over here actually is about Vesta. Vesta is the Roman goddess of fire, not the fire that burns forests or houses, but the fire that is for domestic well-being. Passion, that kind of fire. In Rome they had a temple, and that fire in that temple, that was then actually Vesta herself. And that fire needed to be lit 24 hours all year round. If the fire was on, nothing bad would happen to Rome, but if the fire would extinct, then there might be wars or other dreadful things happening. So there were Vestal virgins, 6 of them, and this is one of them, that had only 2 tasks. Keep the light, the fire light, and to stay virgin. If they didn't, that would be a deadly sin in that case. So, yeah. It is actually quite a relevant picture here because fire, here temperature is quite cool. It's 11 degrees always, day and night, summer, winter, say always. But fire not always just provides warmth, but also light. And I'm not actually sure if you can turn off light of yours. Excellent. Because I want to tell you a picture now, tell you a story of how important light can be. And for that I need the people who have the light in their hand. If you look at the light, there is at the bottom a button. If you push that button, not now, but when I ask if you can push that button for 5 seconds, then the light will turn off. So this is something that really happened. It was 1640. At that time there were a couple of monks, 4 of them, that were looking for a place to hide and also to create a chapel. They didn't know these tunnels, these caves, but they were wise men, so they had a rope, they tied it at the beginning to a rock, and then they started to walk in and roll the rope until they reached the point where they wanted to build something. They made an inscription, and then they went back. Only to find somewhere along the road that the road had snapped, it was broken. So they found a loose end, and they had no clue where the other end was. So then they started to wander around. They had torches, but of course they also died. So if you could perhaps push the button on your lamp. Yeah. If you give to me. One torch died.
Oh.
So as you can see, you still can
Yeah, we can
see,
yeah.
no problem.
Yeah.
If you know the way, you can see it.
Yes.
But the other torch died.
Died?
Still doable.
Yeah.
But now the last torch
Died.
went out. 5 seconds. No, hold 5 seconds. Now it's actually so dark you hardly ever see this.
Yeah.
You can wave your hands in front of your eyes. There's nothing you can see.
Yeah.
That was the same what happened to them. And if you're in the complete dark, yeah, it is almost impossible to find something. What they did is actually try to walk along the walls, and they could see that at the fingertips of these monks because they were damaged. But if you walk here along the walls, there are actually pillars, so you start walking in circles. You don't get anywhere. And unfortunately, they didn't get anywhere anyway. So after a few weeks, they were found dead. And that's the very reason why we also continue our trip using light. It's much easier. If you 5 seconds again, and then it will turn on.
Wow.
Yeah. Right, and that's also, we don't want to lose anything. You're the last person. We're always watching for you.
Okay.
With everybody in front of you.
So you said this one and that painter is the same,
The same.
the same person?
Yeah.
Okay.
You do see a different technique. The other was black, and this is different. This one actually, they painted the what you see. The other one, they first made the wall white,
Yeah.
made it completely black,
Yeah.
and then scratched out.
Okay. Oh, different.
Yeah. Well, they're still black. They're still opening the wall that we get through. But there is still openings, some openings, the earth pipes, as we call them. Places where the air can go out.
So there are pipes.
There are earth pipes, very small ones.
I'm thinking whether this structure is in stranger design.
Yeah. And in the past, I thought they were more. I can take your left for a moment. I can take your lamp also. The last lamp. Is it for a moment? Yeah, if you make sure that everybody can see, so maybe a little bit to the left, otherwise everybody's on one side. Yeah. So what we see over here is a map of the tunnels, but as I mentioned to you, there were about 22,000 tunnels, so this is just a minor part of what it was around 1900. What you see over here is the area where we are now, the red point there is where we are. And the fourth is where we started, then we went over the parking lot. As you can see, there seems to be a tunnel leading to this point. There is, but that's too dangerous. We're not allowed to go in there, so that's why we have to go that way. There is other caves here, like Sonneberg, which you also can actually visit. But there's here a red line, concession line. There used to be lots and lots of tunnels all the way down for at least another 10 meters to the left. But around 1926, ANSI, which is the Dutch Society for Cement Industry, they were given concession to actually take out limestone, but they did not do that through tunnels, they did it from the top. So they took away the sand and then they really cleared it, and now there is a big hole. They don't do it anymore, so they had to restore it and give it at least a very natural look. Lots of animals now living there. A very nice place actually to see those this really open mind that was there from the NC. What you also see over here is a kluis, it's a vault. That one was built here underground 1942, purposely built to store about 750 paintings, the most expensive paintings, most precious paintings that we had in the Netherlands, like for example the Rembrandt, the Night Watch, but also more Vermeers and other big paintings. The reason for it, because there was always a risk that museums would be hit and that here would be safe. The Germans knew it was there because the whole idea was after the war would be over, they would have taken all the paintings to Germany, to their museums. Of course, it ended a little bit different than they expected, so the pieces went back into their museums afterwards. One last thing, what you see over here, it's a kind of a messy thing, the tunnels. Same here, but over here you see there is straight lines, straight corners, much more structured. The reason for this is that in earlier days the owners of the land above there were farmers. They all had small pieces of land, but when you owned the land you also owned the ground underneath it. So the farmers actually farmed in summer, and often in wintertime they went down and they were breaking blocks. They were mining in wintertime in their own thing. But of course, because there were many different farmers, it was all unstructured and you get a mixture of all kinds of tunnels. Same thing over here. Here the monks of Slavante were the owners, and they were really doing it far more structural, and that's also why you see it was in those days also far more rectangle. Yeah, here's some words which means a collapse, and we'll now be going to one of these places where there's a collapse, and I'll tell you why that was. So, if you take your lamps again.
Gefascineerd voor deze geleden. Dat is.
You can also So, yeah, as you can see, this is a collapse. The tunnels that we have been walking through until now generally were about 4 meters wide, not much wider, and that is on purpose because if it would be much wider, there is definitely a risk of collapse of these ceilings. So the block breakers would never make tunnels wider than about this size that we see all around us. So block breakers would never have made this what we see in front of us. So what happened here? It was the year 1794, at the time when the French started to conquer Maastricht, the French Revolution at that time, and they had very much difficulty in conquering the city, not only because of the city walls, but especially even more so of the fort, which was on top of the hill, as you can see, have seen, very strategically positioned in those days to defend Maastricht. So the French knew they would lose many people if they would try to do it on the ground. But they also knew that there were these tunnels underground. And what they decided is, well, if we go underground and we take the pillar which is underneath the fort, and then we blow it up, and there's a hole in the ceiling, and then the fort will come down, and that would make it much easier for them. So, indeed, in the middle, you see what is still left of the pillar, because they blew it up with gunpowder. But they probably did not realize enough that there was this, what I said, 10 meters of stone above it. So it really meant a lot of power that they needed. And also much of the power actually went away in the different tunnels rather than in the ceiling and the pillar. So, no hole in the ceiling. The plan was not correct. Well, it wasn't correct anyway, because the fort is about 150 meters that direction. That is the tunnel that I mentioned, is actually leading from the fort into these caves. But yeah, if there would have been a hole, nothing would have come down after all. In Netherlands, we have a saying that you can do something the French way means only halfway right. So in this case, we're happy that they only did it halfway right. If you have any questions at some point, please always ask. Yeah?
We should bring our lights, right?
Oh, yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Why there are some brown cotton on the
That's iron, more iron stone, and iron, because it's also very wet here, kind of rusts, and it actually gives this brown color. You can go to your right. Yeah, we also there's a short stop here. Because this is again one of, not necessarily most important picture, but the center of Maastricht, also depicted over here. And here you see a very good example of how fragile they are, because it looks all quite well, but somebody decided to touch it from the outside, and immediately you see that it's destroyed. So that is the very reason we ask you not to really touch these paintings. Well, on the other hand, it is interesting to touch the walls, and we're now going through this tunnel, different than the other tunnels, as you can see. It's a Gothic shape. This one was not made by the block breakers. It was a transport tunnel, actually a test tunnel to make a transport tunnel, and it was done in 1928 approximately, so historically not that important. But when we walk through this tunnel, yeah, please feel free to touch the walls to feel what the stone feels, looks like, so no problem.
但是画灯笼一般来讲会在那种有山还有火山的地方来的。
那它是用工位机是吗？
那它就偷一下，偷一下，就按住没有很高。对，然后配远看不到。所以以前的人盖塔 开始是就看要不要用手工法，
不需要这些手，他只用砖块啊，
或者是铁啊，
用的对，但是他为了想要赚钱，就开放这些让大家参观，然后他赚钱先拿的，里面并不是有什么坟墓啊，没有的。
他以前单纯就是挖那个东西。
Oh, that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So you meant like. Yeah. You're gonna kick out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, here, there.
Yeah.
Probably come a little bit further forward. Let's see also see something. Okay, you touch the stone. It feels quite dry, it like crumbles under your finger, which is actually a little bit strange if you consider that well, you know the temperature, but the humidity here is 98%. Very, very high. So very strange that it feels so dry. And that's because this stone has actually quite some peculiar characteristics. Somebody, maybe if you can help me. You can go stand on that side. I'll give you the bottle in a moment and I'll open it for you. What I ask you is just to pour it here so that people really see the water's pouring down.
Okay. Should I open it?
Yeah, well, probably otherwise it comes out
Yeah.
with speed, which is
Yeah.
not
Okay. Should I do it
Yeah.
now? Okay.
So look what's happening.
Yeah. Oh.
Do more, just
Two more. Yeah.
you can finish it.
Finish everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Holy cow.
It's like just absorbing it.
Wow.
It completely disappears,
Yeah.
and you can't even see anymore. No,
完
it
全
is still
没有
dry.
湿的感觉。
So
这个完全没有湿，去摸一下，
this
完全没有湿的感
it is
觉，完全没有。
like a one great big sponge. Yeah, so really interesting how that works. That's why it's kind of magic. It's actually, yeah, it is the stone. It is a kind of sponge. Here you have a different stone because this is limestone. Here you have flint. And here you can see actually it's wet. Flint is much harder. Because it's so soft, it's also easier for the block breakers to actually cut out the blocks by using all kinds of chisels or saws, which then was doable. But once they reach these type of things, they're much harder than iron, and it would break the saws. So how we've seen now the ceiling high, much lower at different levels. But in fact, the ceiling everywhere is at the same level. As I mentioned, it's about 30 meters, 10 meters of stone, and then another 20 meters of ground. So the difference really comes because of the bottom that really changes level. What they did first, when they started to take out blocks, they would be starting at the highest possible level, and they didn't go higher because the quality of that stone was not good enough. We saw it actually in the other one where you have red iron thing. That's not good enough. So this is more homogeneous, a better quality of stone. They started at the highest level. So 1400, they made a lot of tunnels only at this particular level. When they then had all the tunnels made that were allowed in order not to get collapses, they would actually dig down one level and then they started this next level. And they would again do that one level down. So in that sense, they actually work their way down rather than up. You can actually also see that this quite nicely built and the scratches in the walls. They used horses and carts to actually take out the stones. As mentioned, they were very heavy, so they took out the cart and the horses do that. In the first instance, it was dark, of course, also over here, and the carts would sometimes hit the walls, especially in the corners, and you would get scratches. So initially, carts, horses would have been at this level. Then, a few hundred years later, it would have been at this level, with getting scratches, and then later on, it would actually be on the road. So there's also where you can see the history of how these tunnels were made. Yeah? Let's continue. You can see some of the saws that were used, and also a lamp, one of the lamps that they would be using. Well, this is better than the ceiling. This is still, this one here is very good, but this also. Here it started to get worse. You can also see it over here. Stones. It's not space. You can see it. About life here underground in these tunnels. There's no animal life apart from in winter. There are bats here in this case because they hibernate here. So for a couple months in winter, you actually find bats on the ceiling, but no, not at this moment. Very interesting animals. They can lower their temperature up to 1 degree higher than what is here. So their temperature will go down to 12 degrees, and they only will use about 2% of their regular energy they would be using in the winter time. So they can actually stay for a couple of months living with very, very little. Yeah, in winter time you definitely see bats here also flying around. Sometimes they fly a little, but they have to go to the toilet. Yeah. You actually see them. Mainly they're just hanging there. So that's the only animal. What you see over there is just an example what would have been in the past. Because there are a few vegetables like mushrooms, chicory, cardoon, 3 types of plants that actually need to grow partly at least in the dark and in certain environments. So as mentioned, there were horses here, so they also left their droppings as manure here. And what the block breakers did see is that at some point mushrooms started to grow out of the horse manure. So they realized that if we use that, and we can actually plant mushrooms. So for a while, 1950, 1960, it was done commercially. There were more than 100 farmers here that actually created mushrooms. But that's not done anymore. This is just to give an example of what it was in the past.
Just this specific type of mushroom, or a different type of?
No, it's a very specific type.
Okay. But it's not a toxic one, right? It's a eatable, right?
It is eatable, yeah. Restaurants also used it in those days. It was kind of exclusive, yeah. Especially when you know what is going on. Yeah. If you join me here, I will tell you a little bit.
那看到没有？跟这个洞，那个洞呢？
Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right. As mentioned, fire is important, especially if you want to stay a little bit longer here. Go back to the year 1794. As you remember, there were the French soldiers trying to attack Maastricht. The farmers here, they had livestock, pigs, cows, etc. And they also knew that if an army would come and they would see the livestock would be gone. There would be dinner material. So the farmers then decided, at least some farmers decided, let's go with our livestock and with all the things they need underground, and we'll stay here for a couple of weeks to wait until everything is over. Yeah, so they did, and yeah, they had this oven, which is really important, of course, for the fire to keep warm. But also what they did, is the humidity is killing. In all honesty, in 48 hours, if we would not be having the right things, we would be dead here. Your clothes would become wet, and yeah, your energy would really exhaust you. So what they did is they put their clothes very often on the oven, so the clothes would dry again, and they can then change their clothes, and it's much easier than to keep on living. What you also see missing here is a chimney. So for a couple of reasons. One of them, of course, it's you would have to go through 30 meters up in the air, which is difficult. But more important reason, of course, is that if there is a chimney coming out of the ground, soldiers would see the chimney and it would be a giveaway. It's easy. They would know somebody's on the ground. So that's also why it's black here, because all the smoke actually just went up and blackened it. There was a little more draft here because there were more mines and there was not closed doors, so there would be a little bit more draft here. We'd have to get here. And they also had the sleeping room over there, a little bit higher, so the warmth would usually stay higher. The animals would be sleeping on the ground, and they would actually have a very decent place to stay. Well, unfortunately, at some point, a little pig broke loose, and found its way outside, and there was a French soldier or French soldiers. They actually saw the pig, the little pig, and they also knew if you see one, there must be others nearby. So they tied a rope to the paw of the pig, went in again, back in, and then they start squeezing the ear. The pig, of course, screamed, and at some point, the bigger pigs, they started to spring back. And then, unfortunately, the French found all the animals, and they were eaten anyway. So not a good ending here, like with the monks. Then what you see over there, it's the cesspool. Cesspool. Cesspool is
CESS.
yeah. Well, you probably don't know the word. No.
Sewer.
A sewer. It's an underground sewer. It's, yeah, and then your kids speak Dutch. It's,
What do you say?
what do you say in Dutch? It's,
Water.
yeah, well, yeah, you plus and goes under it. Actually, they are in. They were in Maastricht, for example. They were there for the people to be there. Well, it was never used here. It just was placed here to show that they had these things, and also because it actually was made of the same limestone that they have over here. So there is a relation. Beer put. The Dutch word is beer put. No. Yes, again, an example of what is in the past. What? Yeah, actually,
不要摸。
夜阳光怎么会怎么行动的作用？
灯放在上面，我看一下。可以麦克照一下蔬菜。
这是真的吗？真的，这是假的吧？
真的啦，
真的啊。
这是蔬菜。
不可能。
It's eatable. It's an eatable plant. Okay, let's.
Oh, really?
Now, a very brief talk, just to give you a little bit of an idea of how these lock breakers would actually take out locks. First, they would use a chisel, a long iron pole, to hit underneath the ceiling. As you can see, they will make a small slit. You can't saw that, so they would use a chisel there. You can see the chisel marks here all around the ceiling where they banged the stone and made a little slit. But when they had the space, as you can see over here, they would actually saw it, and they would saw all of the parts of the stone except for the bottom. When they also saw the backside of the stone, then they would use kind of breaking tool to make it break forward and then we can take it away. Now about the history of how we are here, what it is. You can put your lamp here also. Yeah, you can also put your lamp on the ground. Can you see it from there? Okay, now about the reason why we have these limestone layers here. We have to go back 72 to 66 million years ago. In those days the world was completely different. There was no ice on the North and South Pole, there was no Himalaya or Alps. The Netherlands, Germany, UK, it was all underwater. Actually, where we are standing now, some 67 million years ago, would have been the bottom of the sea. And there would be about 40 meters water above us. Nice warm water, the temperature would be like in the Caribbean, so really pleasant. And in the seas there were animals living, some of them which we still know, like the shark or a giant turtle. Whales were there. But also this picture does try to describe some of these animals. But then again, dinosaur was not living here because it's a sea, dinosaur lived on land. Mammoths are for much later, so also did not live. This animal, they say there's still one living in some lake in Scotland. It's called Nessie, that little person, but I'm not quite sure. But so what happened? In those 6 million years, of course those animals lived here and they also died here. And when they died, the flesh part would be disappearing, would be eaten or rot away, but the skeleton would actually be underground. And it's not only these animals, but there are also smaller oysters, lobster, but even by far more billions of only one-cell animals, foraminifers they're called. And they all have this similar thing, they all have skeletons. They all have little skeletons with calcium inside. So the calcium actually stays on the ground and forms layers. Very, very slowly. In 1,000 years, only a centimeter of limestone would be built. And through the pressure of the water and also the next layers, it would actually be compressed as it is now. So 1 centimeter in 1,000 years, but if you calculate, if you have 6 million years, 6, 7 million years, you actually get 60 meters of limestone that we have over here. So where we are here now is in a cemetery. These are all the remnants of these animals. So what you touched in that tunnel was actually what's made of the bones of animals 67 million years ago. Well, this animal did live here. Around 1770, the block breakers did find a skull of 1.5 meter, and well, they knew because of the Bible that the world was only 6,000 years old approximately, and in the Bible there was no animal that was described that is that big. So they thought, well, maybe it's a very, very big crocodile, but that's actually not possible because a crocodile is 8 meters. 1.5 meter skull is not possible. So they described it, and later on, 1794, when the French came here, they also had scientists with them, And they actually took the skull to further examine it. And they went to Paris with the skull. We never got it back. It's still in Paris. We asked for it, but we didn't get it yet. So, but they did then find out later on that maybe there have been other animals, extinct animals. And they then called it the Mosasaurus, Mosa for the Maas River here, Saurus being a reptile. So, it's first seen over here. And also the Mosasaurus also lived in Australia, in South America. So it was global, but yeah, it got its name from here. Yeah, that's, I guess, what we see over here. Here you, for example, see still part of that we are talking about fossils. That was sea urchin that was stuck there at some point, because everything is some remnants of the past. Well, we're almost at the end. We'll just make a brief stop at one little painting, which is.
This is another example of
Yeah, this is again of those cards that. Yeah, if you take the lamps.
我帮他拿一下灯，我帮他拿一个灯。跟阿飞走，跟阿飞走。
Can you put the line under the ground there at the bottom? There's some meetings. Yeah, that's fine. So, what you see over here is the oldest painting in this cave. It's over 100 years old and still in good quality, as you can see. Again, also over here, the technique, first white, then making it complete black, and then scratching it out. Maastricht has a history of Maria devotion. There are lots of places in Maastricht, chapels and other places that are dedicated to Maria. So it is obvious that also over here you would have a place where there is some Maria devotion. And there's also a basilica in Maastricht on a square called the Onze Lieve Vrouwenplein, which is the square of Our Lady. That's a basilica. It's also in this picture here to the right. There's a chapel there, and in that chapel, which you can visit, there is this statue of Maria. And there's a block breaker praying at Maria. About 100 years old, a little bit over. But over here is an inscription of 1698. So this particular thing, this tunnel was already built much earlier. As mentioned, the block breakers would not make any paintings. Okay, this is the last stop. We'll try and find our way out. So if you could take the light back.